Hey everybody, I'm Bob Bakert with Jazz Guitar Today, and we're here with Ralph Towner, who is in Rome right now, if I'm not mistaken. Are you in Rome?
Right. Yeah, I'm a resident here.
We're talking Rome, Italy now, not Rome, Georgia, but
Yeah.
Rome, Italy. It's trite to say it, but it's still true, and so why not say it? It's an honor to talk with you.
Oh, thanks. I'm flattered.
Yeah, no, it really is. I mean, God, you've been around since the 70s, really, or late 60s, early
And
70s.
I moved to New York in '68. And
Yeah,
so in that first wave of uh, musicians that were trying to write something different. So,
if I listen long enough to you, I find a way.
oh my God, you got Tim Martin in there too. That was not that gig. And said, "Oh, you see, he's kind of a folk singer." I said, "But
Yeah.
I really needed a gig." And said, "Oh, there's this little folk festival up near Woodstock."
Hmm.
And the little folk festival turned out to have 450,000 people in it.
I mean,
And we carried in by helicopter, and the band. And not only was I playing with this total stranger, I had no idea what was all happening. And as the helicopter loomed over the site
uh-huh.
of my little folk gig I thought I was having, and it's like one of those cartoons where the the fox goes running off the cliff, and just for a moment doesn't realize he's out in midair.
Let me get back to your little gig with Tim Hardin. Now, people
Yeah,
that don't know, Tim Hardin was a folk singer from the 60s who wrote If I Were a Carpenter and Reason to Believe and Lady Came from Baltimore and all of that. And I'm a big fan of his music. And I saw that you had played with him, so that we were kind of, so you're talking about you got hired, I guess, hired onto a gig with him, a little folk gig, and it turned out to be a giant festival.
yeah. Turned out to be the Woodstock Festival.
He did. Did he open?
Original one, 1968, I
Yeah.
guess. Is there. God.
So you're like, I mean, you're like a real musician, and I say that with all respect and sincerity. You've studied everything. I mean, you played trumpet as a kid.
Yeah,
You really went to New York as a pianist, I think.
yeah,
Um,
that's right.
yeah, and
Well, classical guitars by then,
yeah,
but I had worked really hard on the piano when I started very late, also. But in the '60s, I started working on the piano, and with the intention of playing like Bill Evans, Scott LaFaro, and
sure.
Paul.
Well, yeah, but I was reading. I do a little homework. I was reading that you were doing jam sessions in the village with people on piano back then.
Yeah,
I mean, so
yeah,
that, excuse the expression, but that's serious shit. You just weren't messing around, on the piano at
yeah,
home. You were playing with the best players in the world on piano at the
yeah.
time.
At that time, there wasn't this flood of virtuosos that happens. But Keith was there already, and Chick.
Mhm.
But Chick was somebody just lived up the street, and Chick would call me to sub for his gigs, like with some sax player and Stan Getz,
Oh yeah.
and the band that he had that was really nice. Stanley Clark and Tony Williams. I'm going for an audition, to play. And of course, they want me to play electric piano and play just Chick's tunes. Because
Yeah.
Chick called me and says, he just called and said, "You can take my place in this band." But then he called and said, "I'm sorry, but Stan wants to do an audition." So I went up and did an audition, and uh, it was fun. And I was able to play all these chick tunes, but I brought my own tune very cleverly and plopped that in front of Stan, and I had too many. He says, I don't understand these scales. I'm whining. And then tune, I counted up and we played it. And of course, Tony and Stanley just nailed it. There was no problem with them. And so we just were burning away, and poor Stan was like stuck, and that couldn't. But it made him realize I wasn't fucking around.
Oh man!
But because there weren't so many great piano players, I was kind of a third call or second call piano player, and so I would get my gigs like you normally do in a small town.
Yeah.
Somebody hears about the new piano player in town, and if you have an extra gig you can't make, and you ask another piano player to do it, and he says, well, I can't, but there's this new piano player in town that sounds pretty good. And that's how you build your reputation. I'm guessing really, I mean, you have to play really well, or you're forgotten, and you might turn your tail and go back to whatever town you came from. But I had a lot of I was really committed to piano, playing the piano that way. And of course, I've studied all my compositions. I had started rearranging standards or finding alternative chords. Was always a big harmony freak. And Bill was kind of everything to me. I could not believe it. But my motivation really was, before I actually started getting involved in the piano, like, very simple to explain. I just wanted to know what it felt like to be in that space and play like that. I mean, I was just so taken by it, and I had to know, how does that feel?
Right.
And that's that motivation behind almost anything. So models are good to have, and so I started figuring out what Bill was doing with his left hand. And fortunately, I had a roommate play bass, so I had to hear that bass. Like, you move just a few notes around with your left hand. And so even to this day, I'm not a very good solo piano player, because I can't, my skill became just moving these voicings just slightly, one finger, and the whole world is like just within reach under one hand. And
right.
Of course, it all connects to your right hand, the melodies, but something very intuitive about it. And
well, what's funny? What's funny about that is that's very different than your guitar playing.
Well, it really isn't. It's funny to make the link, but
well, let me tell you where I'm going, and then you can respond. I noticed that your bass, your lower voices are very connected, if you will, counterpunctually. I mean, it depends on how far you are, to your melody lines and your mid harmony lines, and so you're very. Well, you're saying your left hand isn't as solid on piano. On guitar, all your voice.
Player, but I of course I'm playing with bass players, hearing bass players that I loved, and that was, when I look back, I'm astounded at the great bass players that I hooked up with. All Bill's bass players, every one of them, and then long duets with. And also, actually, Dave Holland I played with him, and I think Manfred Eicher, he introduced me to Manfred. Dave Holland did, but Dave was another one of those immigrants to New York. He came to play with Miles, and we were also, everyone was descending on New York. I got there maybe a year ahead of everybody from Europe and those people. But I toughed it out and played in these bars. But as you said, I slowly realized the guys I was playing with got better and better, were better. And I said, and realized, well, I must be getting better too. And I was so committed to the music and the harmony and the way it all fit together. And the guitar is basically the auditionist that also covering the bass part. I'm a lover of the bass players and bass concepts. And as I say, I somehow managed to play with every one of Bill Evans's bass players except for Scott, who had died by then. And so I got there at 68, and I hadn't even heard of the Beatles. You know,
Did you?
And now I'm just staggered to see when they started. I mean, damn, they really started early, but 63 or something. If I was a real jazz snob or real classical music snob, and I was just buried. I mean, this obsession with harmony and melody, just how it all works. But I was really obsessed with the emotional feeling and all the emotions that seem to be expressed by this very clever use of what harmony does to the simplest melody. So to this day, when I write tunes, I'm still a kind of a songwriter, but then I go and change the planet that they're all on without altering the melody that much. And it's kind of an unwritten rule that you have to respect the original composer and why you were attracted to the melody, and because it was so good. But as far as like adding harmony, you're like almost a set director. You're changing the whole world that thing's happening in without violating its birth, its heritage. And so you're showing respect, but you're plunging forward, you know, with finding new ways to reveal or couch all this melody in a whole different, like in theater, like a whole different stage set. I mean, a whole different atmosphere,
right,
and world. And so I mean, it's all a real adventure for me. But like really spending a lot of time figuring out substitutions for harmonies for the standards.
right.
Before they realized, well, I'm making such changes. Then I realized I should start writing. I'd had a little diploma as a classical composer, which didn't add up to much value, you know. And so I whatever offers I got to stay in university and teach, I ignored. I mean, and I could ignore anything. It was that practical, because at that point I was kind of orphaned. Finally, my father died when I was 3. My mother died when I was 20. So I had I had some brothers and sisters, older ones, and so I came along very late compared to my brothers and sisters. I mean, it was an accident, I'm sure, but you know, but I had wonderful support. Everybody was quite musical in the family, and nobody said, "Oh, get a real job," or no. I never got hassled about that. So in a way, I was free as a bird before I even got to that age when I got fascinated with the classical guitar. And I was attracted to it because it was like piano could do all this stuff that piano could. It had this ability, but you could do it with a little bit more of a lot more sounds in a way than you get out of piano, just a flat piano. But I love the sound of a piano, especially when it's in tune. And I played a lot of gigs, you know, in New York, and then later traveling around the world. Imagine a tour of India that was like 6 weeks, and all the pianos that we found in these things we were playing at, you know, constant gigs. And all the pianos had been abandoned by the English. Some of them had all their feet chopped off. You couldn't get your knees underneath them, and none of them were in tune. And I had this little piano ring. I like a madman try to straighten the piano right for the thing. And I never could quite do it. I wasn't really a piano tuner, but I could at least get someone to go through it. I mean, it was why am I mentioning all this piano thing?
No, well, because we got talking about the fact that you have a very, very high proficiency as a pianist, and I was going to segue over into, and obviously you're known as a guitar player.
Yeah.
And so your voicings and your fascination with Bill Evans doesn't just come out of a guitar player observing and copying Bill. It comes out of actual knowledge and proficiency on the piano.
It really was. Wasn't. By the time I got to the guitar that far, I knew it had an individual voice, much different set of sounds.
Right.
And plus, when I studied it, because I didn't start until I was 22, I went to Vienna. So that's another thing I was free to do. I mean, nobody in their right mind would go to Vienna with like $300 in their pocket. And somehow managed to make it there. And an audition, which I wouldn't realize, it's a famous music academy. And it's kind of a funny story. I must say, I never tell that story.
Well, go ahead.
I had a roommate that played valve trombone. So it was a B-flat instrument. And I was just starting on the guitar. I wasn't trying to improvise that much on it. And but in order to maybe play some standards or, with this, I tuned it up a half step so that the E strings were in F and everything was up a half step. So it was like very, very high. But I left it there because I kept doing, trying to play little standards with my roommate, bass player, but also working with him with the piano. So connecting with that sound and how to integrate the bass and the chords and all that. But anyway, so I finally got there to this great music academy. And I think Zubin Mehta was graduating the year I arrived from this music academy in Vienna. And so there was a lineup. So I had to audition. I was shocked. I thought, oh God, they didn't warn me about this. And I managed somehow to get there and hitchhiking the wrong direction. I'd never heard of an Autobahn before in Germany. And just getting to Vienna took me like, I managed to get this cheap Icelandic airline, and very dangerous, but it could only land in Luxembourg because it was almost like a pirate company. And it was only legally allowed to land in Luxembourg. So I had to hitchhike from Luxembourg to Vienna, and of course I went the wrong way. Didn't speak German. It took me 2 weeks to get to Vienna from Luxembourg. But anyway, so I did this audition. And as soon as I finished, I managed somehow to do a couple of Renaissance pieces. So, in fact, that was about all I could play. But I wanted to make sure I studied and didn't go around any detours or wrong way roads developing a technique. Because I wanted to have the sound, sound as good as Julian Bream, basically.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's my goal, plus playing just classical music. So I dropped playing anything that was jazz. So I studied only that Renaissance. To get back to the audition with my B-flat guitar, this lineup of the most intimidating professors, all wearing these beautiful black suits. And I'm in my jeans or whatever else I was wearing, because I didn't have many clothes to take with me. Incredible. And so it really says something about being very naive and being a little stupid, because to do what I did was there was no reasonable person that was gonna put the clamps on my my wishes when I was responsible for myself, whatever that meant. And But anyway, to get back, I got to finish the story about what happened. So I played the Renaissance things, but they're all being played a half step high. And so all all these professors were sort of snickering, you know. They said, play a B natural for us. And of course, or play a C. No, what did I do? Yeah, of course I played a B flat.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a B they wanted to hear, so I played a B flat, something like that. But I knew where that sound of C was.
Right.
I knew. I was keeping it quiet, and all the big smiles just fell off their faces. And when the one professor said, "You know," just, well, why is it tuned like that? And I said, well, I started to say, and it was passed through my mind what I was about to say. I had a roommate that played dial trombone, and we played jazz. And I went, it's a long story. But it was obvious that I was a musician, evidently. So,
yeah.
So I got into this with this great professor, and who taught me perfectly. Musically all the way, always with music.
Mm-hmm.
And music that we studied mainly was more like Renaissance lute music and transcriptions and Baroque and Bach and every detail there's never an exercise just thrown at you because somebody else did it. I mean, there was a musical reason for everything, and you could hear it change your playing and the knowledge of it. Great teacher. And by the end of the first year, starting from scratch, I was able to play concerts, classical concerts. But that's because I'm a musician, and the physical tools, if you're taught well, they develop. But if you go off in some sort of side road with some weird position or something that hasn't got anything to do with the sound much, of like you start imitating photographs of great players, you never really see their hand, or you'll never learn to play an instrument until you're hearing it and you reach for something you want to hear, the quality of something. Right. In my case, I had a quite high aim when I was trying to accomplish, because on the piano I'd managed already at that point before I just left it for couple of years. I knew the sound that I wanted to get. I mean, I'd heard this great piano player from Nat King Cole, Bill Evans, of course, and anybody with a great piano player with a great sound. Yeah. But the ability to control the pedals or something, it just was something innate that I had, and by playing the music. Anyway, my whole musical life has been really, really intuitive about what emotionally I'm trying to reach or what sound I'm trying to get to. And it's free from, it wasn't built through this kind of torturous approach where, like, a lot of young students just give up. Music is this hard, They didn't have the motivation to really, or the right teachers. And so that was very fortunate. I just blundered around and blundered my way to New York City finally when I thought I was equipped. Right. Which I was, and I didn't try to immediately shove the classical guitar into the scene. Right. But the scene was changing, even so colorful. And then I joined a group that asked me to play 12-string guitar, and I thought, oh, there go my nails. I don't like this, I'm going to lose on my sound. But then they had a 12-string, and so I started tuning it differently. But I found it sounded like a harpsichord. But I was using classical technique, so it wasn't a strumming thing for me. And so I kind of waited, like draw all these things with a lot of different attacks and sounds, and I found a whole nother way to play this folk instrument. And then that led to some other. So I played in this wonderful group that had great instrumentation, and I was hired the Paul Winter's Consort, and I was hired, and along with me, hired at the same time was Colin Walcott and Glenn Moore, and there was Paul McCandless playing the most unbelievable oboe with all the potential new jazz and stuff that was didn't have a real platform that made it show what a beautiful instrument was without having to play it like a saxophone quite. Although he eventually did play it like Charlie Parker, but without he could do any kind of nuance. And he was like, he still is. I mean, he doesn't play the oboe anymore, and which is sad. I mean, but he became like a benchmark of all the classical oboe players in all the orchestras in the world, basically. So he became kind of a superhero for all the oboe players. That how he evolved, you know. But anyway, so that was so we made off with the four of us and broke ranks with this original band sextet that kind of got us out of the bars, really. I mean, then we started playing college concerts, and anyway, really wonderful kind of evolution. Still keeping all this stuff going. So I still had my life as a jazz piano player and my life as a. Then I started playing Brazilian music, so I always had this ability to play different kinds of music other than besides my own.
So you met up with Wayne Shorter on 12-string guitar.
But 2 years earlier, that's why he before Weather Report was even invented yet.
Yeah.
And he called me up, and I went over to his apartment, which was really fun. Just the two of us, if you can imagine. And Wayne is showing me all this incredible stuff he's writing, and we're jumping all over his apartment, his little apartment, and I'm showing him my tapes and stuff. And so he had heard about my 12-string playing from, I think, Miroslav Vitus, because Miroslav played bass. I would hire Miroslav to play bass on some of my little jazz lounge jobs in Manhattan. So this is how everything is formed, and pretty soon I'm using everybody. I think I had one band. I think we got $20 a night with this little thing, and I put together this little band with Miroslav and I think by then it was Ayrto and Michael Brecker, and you know, this is the kind of shit that was going on.
I know, I love it. I mean, it's absolutely.
I mean, it was a little town, but the people you were calling to come over and hang out or play, or you would go over and practice things like with the Breckers and at Dave Holland's place, and with Abercrombie discovered, and we really hooked up. But the same with, you know, the way it spread, your name, somebody else's name, it was strictly grapevine, small town stuff.
Sure. Well, you
didn't get agents, you know, and get appointed a job.
So the music of Oregon, if you can talk about that for just a minute. I mean, that was so far ahead, at least from my perspective. You know, how did you? I mean, I'm sure you've answered this question a million times, but I'm going to ask it 1,000,001. What the hell were you guys thinking when you put that's
what we were thinking. We weren't thinking about being ahead of anybody.
You were.
We had four. I'm still. even at the place where we could, or even worried about it or thinking it in those terms, how we stacked up in terms of, I mean, we admired, like Improvisational Orchestra and even Weather Report. They had already done one album. And anyway, but we weren't thinking about that. And what the way it worked was that we all played instruments that didn't drown each other out, tabla and percussion. Unfortunately, Colin Walcott was also a trained classical percussionist and conductor. So this guy had musical brains necessary, and McCandless was unbelievable. And he had done some arrangements and played sax, and he could play every reed instrument or every wind instrument because his two parents were both band teachers, high school band teachers.
Right.
So he grew up learning all the instruments, and of course, but specializing on the double reeds. And so he fit in with this wonderful melodic instruments that he really could play, but he wasn't even aware of what was to come. What really happened was also, I finally started writing like a crazy man, and my intent with all the writing that I did anyway was with that group, so to make sure everybody was playing to their strength somehow, without imitating anybody else. We weren't imitating people or playing, but we had to, if you're going to even play an Indian instrument like the sitar and the tabla, you couldn't just be fucking around with those things. and Colin Walcott happened to have been not only a student but a roadie, a road manager of Ravi and Aliraka. So he was getting all his lessons on the instruments in hotel rooms and on the road. For him, it was a real thing. And he really has an ear and a sense of touch he did for sound. So he was a wonderful part of this group, what he could do. And then, of course, Glenn's bass playing was sort of wild and crazy, but really had personality. And we all had experience with hearing 20th century music, free music, and then standards as far as like Paul and especially Glenn and I. And so we had this collective thing. But as I said, my intention was to write music that made everyone sound comfortable.
Right.
And with their skills, and then keep trying new, for me, music that have these unusual harmonies and different scales. I mean, I never mentioned this, but I really also had a wonderful kick in the ass from Denny Zeitlin, who's is a great piano player. And I never give him any credit. It's like I keep forgetting. But Denny Zeitlin had a wonderful way of harmonizing tunes. And I got bitten by that also. And as a way to slowly depart from sounding exactly like Bill, except whenever we would play some jam sometimes after a gig, we would haul out all the Bill Evans tunes, and I would just put myself in that place again, And Glenn, of course, was a great follower of Scott LaFaro. And then to meet these people, and I got lots of great stories. I mean, I'm an old fart now with all these stories I can tell about people. That I didn't realize that I knew that people, how famous they became.
Oh, yeah.
Jacques Pastorius came and banged on my door in my apartment in New York, and I threw. You never do that. You never go to a person's apartment and bang on the door. And so I open it, and here's this big guy. And he said immediately, he says, I'm the world's greatest bass player, and I wrote this piece for you. And he jams this incredible, impossible piece to play with harmonics in it. And looking at it, no way I'll be able to play that. But in the same breath, he's pushing his way into the apartment, says, and you got to hear this, and has a vinyl record of himself, slams it on my old turntable. We listen to that, and yeah, I gotta say, I mean, for every boastful sounding thing this guy would make, he could back it up. I mean, Jesus, maybe you are the best player in the world. And then I followed his career, and then he hooked up with Pat.
Yeah.
And they're playing in bars, you know, and but
that's amazing.
Let me I was established, and they were young, these new young guys coming to town. Anyway, but it just goes on and on like that. And
so I'm going to move us a little. I'm going to move us a little forward. Oregon was way. I don't know if it was ahead of its time, but I will say that it is definitely what I'm trying to say is that the world sort of hasn't progressed from. I mean, that music is still holds up like crazy. I mean, it's so if you haven't heard those records or haven't listened to Oregon, I really, you know, people out there, you know, go check this stuff out. It's freaking incredible. And I want to make sure that we get that said, because it's truly incredible music. Now, what are you doing today? You're in Rome, and you're released this new record called At First Light, and the PR on it talks about, you know, Bill Evans, and talks about all these different people that you're influenced by. What do you want to tell people about At First Light?
Well, I don't know. I wrote these program notes on the back. I was kind of proud of it. Kind of in a thumbnail sketch of my entire musical life, basically. You know, hearing Hoagie Carmichael in the 40s when I was born in 1940. So I actually waded my way through all these layers of music, like anybody does, really. But they were being absorbed or attached, and all throughout my life. And so that ended up, I realized, well, that is a little bit of a thread throughout this record. But so I picked tunes that I like, you know, and I came across all of them in different ways and at different times. I heard the original versions when they came out with Hoagie Carmichael, and then Little Old Lady was another one of his. But I heard I really got not turned on by Little Old Lady when I was at one of Keith's trio concerts, and they were like just connecting all different standards, because they didn't have to even know what they're going to play next and thing. So suddenly they broke into this Little Old Lady. I thought, Jesus, I know that one, and oh man, it's a wonderful little thing. And tune. So I said, I got to do a guitar version of that. And then I'd heard, I'd always known this, Danny Boy. And I thought, it would be beautiful played on the guitar. So, but with some adjustments. But so just pieces that really struck me. And then the pieces I was writing, I was very proud of all those. I mean, they did include a little portrait of how I was progressing, you know, or changing. But I felt like this At First Light ended up being a real collection of my emotional approach to music, anyway, and intellectual. But I've always prized the fact that people can be moved. I just played a solo gig in Shanghai, China. I haven't been to China, and I didn't know what to expect. And what turned out was here was 1,000 people that every one of them knew what I did, and the ones that didn't were quick to find out. And it was like a Western audience completely. In fact, Shanghai was just like at every store known to, the department store known to man, and just very Western in as far as the thing. But another positive thing was, so this raving audience was just totally into the music, and they were. Now then I signed autographs for a line of people, over 100 at least. They were all like in their 30s most, which is kind of like and they were there for just the power and familiarity of the music, and they intuitively, they loved it, and but they were also very hip about it, and you could hear that they were hearing what I was doing. And this still happens all over the place. I mean, in India too, and they don't even know what the hell harmony is. But they know something's going on. If they're convinced when I'm playing that there's something going on, and they're drawn to that, and it's another little credo. They're drawn to this music, and they like guitar, but when they my goal is to play the guitar well enough so that people don't pay attention to that,
right,
and get drawn by the music itself.
Yeah.
If the music, any kind of power, any way it can spirit you away or be instinctively heard. So that's why I'm always interested in non-musicians' opinions about it, the ones that like it, of course.
right.
And I for anybody that doesn't like it. So
Well, no, I listen. I've watched and listened to you play, and you have exquisite tone and great feel, and you communicate emotionally through your music beautifully.
Well, I couldn't do much better than that, and
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, you just do it beautifully, and it's that's not common, to have all of those traits put together. So everything you've talked about, in our conversation, really comes down to that. You just communicate your emotions beautifully with exquisite technique and tone. And putting all that all together is, it's a big frickin' deal, Ralph.
Yeah, well, that's nice of you to say. Yeah, I mean but there are a lot more people that really do this, though. I mean, these kind of musicians exist, and Keith was one of them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. They're all over the place, and Wayne, of course, and Miles. Well, Miles has he's a backbone, or whatever you call it.
Right.
The best example of somebody who you never hear people say, "Oh, what a great trumpet player." Boy, that does not capture Miles Davis at all.
No.
Miles just takes you off on another planet.
He was a facilitator.
Yeah, it was amazing, but he had a way of doing it too. I didn't know him at all, but of course, all the tales from Keith about Miles and Scope too. But anyway, he has a big mark on a lot of people. It's very important. So but his mark is really this. You can't concept a little too cold of a word,
No, but he was a hell of a trumpet player. But that's
you had to be that.
Yeah.
But you had to get that out of the way,
right?
And so nobody could sit there and be awkward, worried about you fucking up right and left.
Yeah.
And I still about that, but if I'm carried away, that's when this COVID really sort of interrupted the ability to be carried away by your own playing. In public.
Right.
And when finally concerts came back, I realized I had to relearn how to play the guitar and play music in front of a bunch of people, which meant no distractions, no worrying if you left the gas on in the apartment, oh, just like really, silly things like that. Also, the danger of saying, gee, I wonder if they liked that or something. After you play a little lick, and then, of course, if you stop the speed of thought that you have as a musician, if you interrupt it with a thing like, I wonder if they like that, or in my case, you're knocked off the pedestal and you're falling down. You have to fight your way back up, get back in the groove, or in the zone. And for me, this is going on, but it's amazing how many people don't realize they're just falling off the horse, like 50 times in a concert.
Well, I was just thinking about, the music is cerebral and it's physical. So you have to be able to conceptualize it, and it's got a heart component to it as well. And
Yeah.
sometimes what looks cool with your hands doesn't sound all that good to the ear, but it looks cool. Everybody go. I've known a lot of guitar players who play with their eyes and perform with other people watching cool stuff. And when I was listening to your playing, you've got obviously, that's as close to pure classical technique as I've heard any jazz player play.
Yeah, well, that was my intention.
Yeah.
To always maintain that kind of level of technique, or
Yeah.
that way to bring out the sounds and
Yeah.
in the classical guitar. So that was like necessary to study with a great classical guitar teacher. And
Well,
but I always had intention of really making dynamics and touch and attack, all that.
No, and it's there. I mean, strictly, for our audience, the technical side of the guitar is definitely there, no question about it. The compositions are incredibly creative, and the approaches to the things that you did not compose are, you keep throwing around Bill Evans, but I definitely hear that Bill Evans elusiveness, if you will, going on in your harmony. And I'm going, man, I mean, it's there's a lot of guys that can play a lot of notes these days, but not everybody can pull it all together and have it come out, as I said earlier. Can't have it come and authentically communicate emotion to your audience at a high level of technical ability and a high level of cerebral understanding of the harmony, the melody, the rhythm, your phrasing, everything. I mean, Ralph, you're Ralph frickin' Towner, man.
Yeah, I was just saying, who's this guy you're talking about?
Yeah, no, I mean, but you are. I mean, that's why you can go to Shanghai and play for 1,000 people, they quote unquote, and have them know your music and know your tunes, because
that was a total surprise. I mean, I didn't expect that.
Well, I think I'm sorry.
Anyway, see, I've got another story, 1,000 stories to go with that.
But we got time for one more story. Go for it, brother.
Oh no, I just ran dry by pointing it out.
Oh no, you lost your page?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I mean, I had a senior moment there.
Well, you're a little bit ahead of me, but I have them too, so no worries there. Well, listen, man, thank you so much for doing this today. The record is At First Light. It came out in March, if I'm not mistaken. Beautiful, 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 beautiful piece of work from a guy that has been there from the beginning of it. Played with everybody. I mean, literally every name, all the names, the hollowed names. You played with them all. And,
I'm a little amazed at that.
I mean, And here's the thing that's really, really cool. You're living in frickin' Rome. That ain't too bad.
But no, I fell madly in love, and I have found this wonderful, true love, and we've been together now for over 30 years.
Wow.
And I mean, we're really happy with it. She's an actress and a writer, but she's currently she's not here today because she's doing a film on location for about a week, and have to figure out what to eat and what to feed.
Well, we'll go downstairs.
Oh yeah, right down to the Kentucky.
Yeah. Well, no, there's no Kentucky. Listen, I've been there. There's no Kentucky Fried. Go downstairs and get yourself a gelada because they're on every corner.
Oh yeah, no, I know. I have my favorites, but I'm in a neighborhood that everything is within a few steps from.
Oh, I love that about Rome. I love that about, you know.
I don't know. We've got lucky with the neighborhood we're in, and everything's just like across the street or the door, and some of them are the best in Rome, like the sweet shop and great bread thing. And I have a little gym I go to that's right next door.
Oh man,
I don't even have to. I can walk out there in my shorts and gym thing, go down the ramp, do my little workout, come right back up, and be home in less than a minute. Less than.
Well, I'll tell you, I only eat when I do eat wheat. I don't eat much wheat, but I only eat wheat with Italian wheat. Italian bread, Italian wheat, because it has it's different than what we grow over here.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that taste different. I mean, the things I didn't know about.
Yeah. Now you know.
Yeah, it's a Mediterranean diet, they call it. So
yeah.
I could still stop myself on that and get overweight, and if I'm not careful, which I haven't lately.
So here we are with Ralph Towner from Rome, Italy. I'm Bob Bakert with Jazz Guitar Today. The record is At First Light. It's on ECM. We didn't even talk about ECM and their philosophy, which people don't know. It's basically record everything in a couple of days and make it as live as possible, so everything's vibrant and fresh and right there as the musician played it. And I love that label, ECM. Love that label. And you've been on your solo records. Every one of them is on ECM for all these years. You're one of his first guys.
Yeah, I was one of the first guys in the early 70s, 72.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ralph.
Okay, thank you.
All right, man. Thank you very much. Bob Bakert for Jazz Guitar with Ralph Towner. Have a wonderful time. Let's do this again because, man, you got so many stories. Let's do this again and we'll go all
old fart stories.
I love it, man. I freaking love it. You're a little bit of you're one of the few guys that I interview that's an older fart than me, because you mentioned Sco earlier. Sco's younger than me. So
wow, I didn't realize he's pretty old. So you don't look.
Well, I know how old you are. I'm 11 years younger than you.
Wow, man, incredible.
Well,
that's that's a hearty age. Anyway.
Well,
I'm 71 or 2 again.
I'm 72. But you know what? As you know, if you make it this far past a certain age, chances are you're probably going to make it for a while longer, which I'm grateful for that. Take care, my friend.
Okay.
Have a good one. Enjoy. Bye.
Bye.